Hi everyone, this is Yana and you're watching the Clean and Simple die cutting video series. Today I decided I wanted to create sort of like a Valentine type card, and for this project I will be using some dies from Spellbinders. So I have this set of really cute arrows from the Spellbinders Inspire line, and I decided I wanted to use them in a somewhat unusual way. I thought about making a background for a card using my dies. So today I'm going to be using individual dies and I'm going to be creating a die cut background. You can of course use like a ready background die for this, but I find that when you have these individual dies, your possibilities are a lot more wider. You know, you can use these individual dies individually, and then you can, get creative a bit and create a background. You can create a positive background, or like I'm going to show you today in my video, you can create a negative background. So here I have a piece of cardstock, and this is some cardstock from Simon Says Stamp. It is cut slightly smaller than the A2 card. I think it's about half an inch smaller on both sides, and I used a little my pencil, just a regular pencil and a ruler, and I drew some diagonal lines. I drew those lines because I wanted to make sure that my die cut elements were going to be placed at the same angle and that they were going to look uniformed and neat. I then started by placing my dies onto my cardstock, and I started with this arrow with a little heart. Now the dies that are in this set, they are pretty much sort of like universal, I guess. You can rotate them either side, but then there's this one die with a heart that has to be placed horizontally in order to look nice. So I started with that particular die, and I used some washi tape, or you can use like painter's tape or low tack tape to make sure that your dies are secured in place. You need to tape them to your paper to make sure they do not shift while you're cutting. So I started with that die and I ran it through my Artisan Explorer machine, and I created that first die cut. I then continued layering more dies onto my paper and die cutting them. Now, as I said before, I originally I used my Artisan Explorer machine, but because it's sort of like a smaller machine, I noticed that I wouldn't be able to use it to die cut the rest of these background pieces. So I then switched to my Grand Caliber machine from Spellbinders, but you can use any die cutting machine for this, any die cutting machine that you already have, and the one that's going to fit a background this big. So I die cut my background. I used an eraser to erase those pencil lines, and then I moved on to stamping. I decided I wanted to use a stamp set from Avery L, and I used this Oh Shoot sentiment to add something to my card. Now, because I use such dark colors of cardstock for my background and for my card base, I thought that I wanted to use a lighter color of ink for my stamp sentiment. So instead, I didn't want to use black at first. So I went through the colors of ink that I had, and I decided I wanted to use the Seattle Sky dye ink from Clear Snap. It's from a Pool Party color box kit eye set, and I stamped that first, but I thought that it looked kind of not dark enough, too light. So I then grabbed my black ink and I stamped again. I wanted to stamp that second time directly on top of the first stamped impression, but I couldn't, because it's such a detailed image. I couldn't layer my images exactly or precisely. So I ended up having this sort of like an offset stamped sentiment, and I actually really liked the way it looked. It looked cool, and the sentiment had a little bit of a teeny tiny barely visible shadow, so I liked that. So sometimes mistakes can turn into something really nice and pretty. I then decided I wanted to add another sentiment, so I used this You Mean the World to Me sentiment from another stamp set from Avery L, and I stamped it on a piece of the same cardstock that I used for my background with black ink, and I adhered it to my die cut background using some foam adhesive. Now, what I wanted to talk about on this video in detail is using foam adhesive. If you notice, I used white foam adhesive to adhere my background to my card base, and then I used some brown foam adhesive to adhere that sentiment to my die cut background. And I should have used brown or black adhesive right away, but I forgot that I had that kind of adhesive. You know, I had white adhesive on hand, and that's what I used, but it would have looked a lot better and a lot more professional, I guess, if I were to use a black or at least a brown or, you know, a dark adhesive to adhere my die cut background to my card base. And I know that the one that I used is from Imaginess. They had this kind of adhesive long time ago, and it's been on sale in some stores. And then Scrapbook Adhesives also has black adhesive, so you might be able to find colored adhesive in various places. Now, to make my card a little bit more, you know, feminine, I guess, or a little bit more cheerful and brighter, I decided I needed to add some color. So I die cut a few more arrows, and I used some pinks, some pink cardstock. I think this one is from Simon Says Stamp as well, and the card base and the die cut piece, and actually pretty much all the cardstock that I used here is from Simon Says Stamp. So I cut two more arrows for my card front, and for the first arrow that I cut, I didn't put any double-sided adhesive on the back, so it wasn't adhesive, so I ran it through my Xyron sticker maker and I turned it into a sticker. But for a second arrow, I placed some double-sided tape on the back before I created the die cut. So when after I die cut my arrow, I ended up having an adhesive die cut, so that kind of saved time for me a bit. And finally, to embellish my card, I added some white floss. This is just some regular white floss that I bought some time ago, and I've been loving it, and I've been adding it to a lot of my projects. And I also added a couple of enamel dots from Doodlebug. I picked a few different colors or a few different shades of pink to finish my card. And then if you noticed, for the inside of my card, I also die cut a few of these arrows just to tie the inside to the front of my card. So this is all for today, and I hope that this gives you an idea on how you can use your individual stamps to create a die cut background. You know, there are lots of like ready dies that can be used to create a background, but you know, you can use them only for that background, while but when you have these individual dies, you have more options with them. You know, you can use them individually, or you can use them to create backgrounds. So I'm hoping that this gives you something to try, something to experiment, and I really hope that you enjoyed this idea. If you liked my video, please click like, you know, maybe share it with your friends, and drop me a comment. I love reading your comments. I just don't always have the time to reply to them, but I read every single one of them. Thank you for watching, and if you're looking for a supply list for this particular card, you can find it below in the video description, or you can find it on my blog, and I'll have a link to my blog in the video description. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye.